So with the release of the new Tudor Pelagos 39, it has made the decision for many buyers difficult when thinking of the best watch from Tudor for around $4,000 from a dive watch perspective that can fit a smaller wrist. With that new Pelagos release, I think many people that were maybe looking at the Black Bay 58 over the last few years, maybe to think twice on which one is better to go for. So in this video, we're gonna actually put both of these watches side by side, putting them through 11 points of comparison and criteria so that we can determine the better watch for the right type of individual. So how this will work, we have 11 categories. Each category will have 1 point associated with it. If one watch wins a category, it will get a point. If they tie, or if it's hard to really determine a winner in that category, we'll call it a draw. They'll both get a point. And at the end, we'll tally up the total number, and then there will be a winner. But also associated with the winner, I do want to also talk about at the end, what is the maybe better watch to go for each type of individual out there? Because I think these are two different watches that are probably better suited for a distinct type of buyer. So for these 11 categories, let's just list them off and then we'll go through each single one. Optionality is number 1, wearability for point 2, versatility 3, bracelet for 4, bezel for 5, case and dial finish next. Then we have water resistance, move into movement, heritage, dive capable is a category. This whole idea basically being how capable is it actually of doing the job of its intended purpose of diving, even though of course that's not going to be what most people are going to need from it. And finally, talk about price. So this video is not intended to be a comprehensive review of each of these watches, more of a side-by-side, just going through these point system. If you want a definitive understanding of the Black Bay 58, we have a full article looking at every single Black Bay 58 model, hands-on and written by Mark Bernardo. Mark Bernardo has joined our team since the start of the year. He's been an industry vet for 20 years, worked at Watch Time magazine for many years, and is doing a phenomenal job, did a great job with this write-up. So if you want everything you need to know about that Black Bay 58 model family, I will link to that in the description down below. Mark did a phenomenal job with that piece of content. Also, while you're there, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands. We've served over 25,000 customers all across the world. Also, all the content here is funded by the selling of watches on our store. I think a lot of people think we just make this content based on maybe what some of the brands are paying us. That is not the case. We 100% curate all the content here, and that is all supported by the hiring of people to help fund the content, bringing you 3 or more videos every single week. I think we have the most consistent content operation that would not be possible without TeddyBaldassarre.com. All of the watches featured there are hand curated by myself. So this is not like other stores where maybe you look at all the different models and you think, okay, all right, I don't know if that's the right one to go for. All of these are, I think, the best picks from every single brand that we sell. Definitely check it out, TeddyBaldassarre.com. So for category number 1, we have optionality. And this category is really specifically looking at how many different options or different SKUs or products do you have to choose from as a buyer within each one of these collections? And this one is pretty easy, Black Bay 58. The Pelagos 39 is more in its infancy with its first iteration being created this year. The 58's been around since 2018, seeing that original gilt version with the navy to follow, and then a barrage of different case material options and more playful types of approaches with that 58 case. So obviously here, point 1 is going to go to the 58, but with a little bit of an asterisk next to it just because the 39 Pelagos is still so new. But point there, Black Bay 58. For point number 2, we have wearability. And this is one that was challenging for me. But I will say this, now this is both of these watches, and just Tudor in general, I am very familiar with the watches that they create. I'm an owner of a Black Bay 58, so I've worn that watch a lot, and I spent a lot of time with that Pelagos 39 on the wrist. The end result of it all, even with the wearability being slightly more compact in the lug-to-lug end for the Pelagos, and it being titanium, the weight is 140 grams with the 58 versus 107 grams when you go with the Pelagos 39, I still like the way that the 58 wears on the wrist. And the one reason why I think that is the case is mostly the clasp. Now the clasp is great on the Pelagos, but one thing it does affect is going to be the wearability and makes it feel a bit chunkier on the wrist. The big reason for this is it's going to be thicker with that T-fit, but mostly the responsibility of it being thicker is going to be contributed as a result of that extension, that dive out extension within it. The actual length of that reverse side of the clasp is around 46 millimeters. So you're almost talking about a clasp that is just as long as the entire case of the watch itself. So that does create a very kind of strange wearing dimension when you factor that in. It's not a burden. Don't let it get confused and say this is a deal breaker for the watch, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about this. And as somebody who spent a lot of time wearing the 58 and a bunch of different Tudor watches, this is something that just stood out to me right away. So I would give a slight, and I mean a slight nod to the 58. The lighter titanium does help out the Pelagos, but there's just something for me about the 58 that just gives it a slight advantage here, and it's a hard thing to really articulate without trying both of these on. That's just my experience, my opinion. Again, this is a very slight win by the 58. They both wear wonderfully. For the next category, we have versatility. So what I'm looking at here is a watch that has the ability to be pulled off in a wide variety of situations. I'm going to also give the slight edge to the Black Bay 58. And the reason why I'm going to say that is the case is I think the 58 can be dressed up a bit easier than that of the Pelagos. I think both of them are versatile watches, but I do think it's always harder to dress something up that is a little bit more informal than the other way around. I would rather take something that is a bit more dressed up in its appearance. There's a little bit more of this heritage design. It feels a tad more dressy and less utilitarian with the Black Bay 58 in comparison to the Pelagos. The Pelagos is an unabashed approach to what I would say is that original ethos of those Tudor Submariner models in a contemporary package. The 58 is just leaning into the heritage realm, which allows them to, I feel, just a little bit more refined around the edges, even quite literally with some of that beveling that you're gonna find on the side of the case. How I like to look at it is another way. Let's just say this. What's easier, to wear dress shoes with like workwear or denim, for an example, or taking work boots and trying to wear that with a suit? I think that kind of proves my point. Now that's a more crazy extreme. That is not what you're seeing here with comparing these two models. The Black Bay 58 is only slightly more versatile when it comes to this upside, but I think with that instance, I think you have to give the 58 just a slight edge. So now we're looking at bracelets. So you heard my previous point talking about the large clasp that we're dealing with here, but even with that being the case, I think the bracelet is still going to be better for many people out there. This is now just getting into the general specs that are coming with the bracelet. How well done is it? You are getting a larger clasp here, but you do get a lot of upside as well. The micro adjustment system with the T-Fit is probably class leading. It is simply phenomenal. In addition to that, you're also going to be getting a titanium bracelet. It's well finished, and then also going to have that dive out extension, which for myself, I can live without because I think that would allow the clasp to be smaller, but I do think there are going to be certain people out there that are going to like this feature. There's just more going on with the bracelet on the Pelagos in comparison to the Black Bay 58. Both are very good, but I think you have to give the edge here. And also factoring in with the Pelagos purchase, you are also getting a rubber strap as well. So not exactly going to be talking about the bracelet here, but still I think a nice little side point, what makes these watches maybe stand out even more. So the Pelagos gets on the board with its first point. Now for our next category, we have bezel. And for bezel, I'm looking at all the different factors, the action of the bezel, the material, also the legibility. All of these things are what I'm going to be thinking about. And for that, the Pelagos wins pretty handily here. With the ceramic insert, that's going to have some more durability than aluminum, although some people might not like the glossier nature of the ceramic in comparison to aluminum and more that heritage look. I think from a material basis, people are going to say it's more premium. Also, the lume on the bezel of the Pelagos, I think is a nice touch. It allows it to be a bit more utilitarian, shines very well as you would expect. Action for both of these are phenomenal. I think they're class leading for the price range. One other consideration for the Pelagos is it has a slight overhang with that bezel, which is going to allow it to be easier to manipulate compared to the 58 just slightly. But the win here, easy win to the Pelagos. So now we're looking at case and dial finish, and this was a tough one for me, but I'm going to give a slight edge to the Black Bay 58 for the reasons being, I think it's a bit more refined. Now, part of that is just going to be a byproduct of using titanium, grade 2 titanium. It's a tough material to work with in comparison to stainless steel when it comes to polishing and things of that sort. But even with that being the case, I think some of the detailed elements of the case as well as the dial are slightly more refined and going an extra mile. Specifically when looking at the hairline bevel on the side of the case, but mostly when it comes to the dial. You look at some of the steel frame elements around the markers compared to just larger plots of superluminova. I think that adds a bit more visual interest. That steel framing also is included within the hands on the 58, and the bezel also has some different raised elements with its lume pip as well as its steel border there as well. The other thing to consider is that the Pelagos, now shifting down to 39 millimeters, is going to omit some of the design characteristics that many associate with the model family, now without the rehaut, which I thought was a cool three-dimensional aspect to the dial that I really liked. I also liked how it was able to house within it the date and how that would reciprocate and be almost perfectly symmetrical with the marker at the 9 o'clock when you factor that in. I thought that was just such a cool feature of that watch. So all considered, I do think the 58 gets slightly a bit more of an edge here, but it is close again. Comparing stainless steel with titanium is almost like a fleeting idea to debate about, but I do think around the corners, also looking at the dial, I think the 58 slightly more from the finishing department. For our next category, we have water resistance, and this one pretty straightforward. They're going to be tied. 200 meters versus 200 meters. With the new Pelagos, you're losing the helium escape valve as well as the 500 meters of water resistance that would come with the standard, but still both of these stack up quite well. I would probably say that if I was going to dive with one of these, I would say the Pelagos is probably going to be better suited, but still when it comes to water resistance, both 200 meters, so obviously a draw. Next we have movement, and again, I think this has to be a draw. For the Black Bay 58, you have the MT5402 or the MT5400, depending on which one you go for. With the new Pelagos, you have the MT5400. Typically, the MT5400 is going to be used in some of those models that had an open case back, but ultimately they're going to look the same, function the same. 70-hour plus power reserve, COSC certification, also getting the silicon balance spring. Pretty much some no-nonsense movements that are class-leading, produced by Kinesi, so the manufacturing arm for movement production for Tudor. Some of the best movements you're going to find from a manufacturer perspective in this $3,000 to $4,000 price range. So for these next two categories, I wanted to really call out these 2 points because I think they are pretty much the determining factors in helping to describe these watches and what they're going for despite some of these other characteristics. The first one is going to be looking at the category of heritage. Now, both of the Pelagos and the Black Bay line were launched essentially the same year, so it's hard to say which one has better heritage, but I think for this, you have to go with the Black Bay. The Black Bay to me is going to be more leaning into this heritage idea. I would say it also aligns with the big crown Submariners from years prior, which is a cornerstone of the brand's image. You're also looking at the design factors and what you're probably looking for from a watch that would more be in alignment with that heritage angle. Riveted bracelet, you have a gilt version, aluminum insert. You also have the infusion of the rose logo making an appearance on the crown for these watches. So I do think the heritage point is gonna have to go to the Black Bay. But then in opposition to that, you then have the dive capable category. So this is all about the idea if you were actually diving, and these are dive watches, they're marketed as that, what would be better suited for the job? The reality is the more dive capable watch will probably still be the Pelagos. And I mentioned this earlier in the video, but the ethos of those 1970s Submariners used by the Marine Nationale, the Pelagos, I think, embodies many of those characteristics from a modern perspective. You look at the bracelet with the T-fit extension, also with the additional dive extension. You're also getting a ceramic bezel. The lume components are going to also be helpful in this instance. Titanium is a great material, lightweight on the wrist, and then also getting that additional rubber strap is going to probably be more in alignment with the diving capable crowd. Yes, this is all pretty arbitrary in terms of making a point because I don't think there's gonna be anybody that's gonna be diving with these watches. Let's be real. But when I'm talking about the focus of these watches and what they're going for, which one goes in one direction versus the other, I think this is an important point of distinction. And then for our final category, we have price. And for this, we have to give a slight edge to the Black Bay 58. But just a slight edge. Now, the retail price on a bracelet for the entry-level steel options for the Black Bay 58 at the time of recording this video is $3,800 US dollars. And then for the Pelagos on the titanium bracelet 39, you're talking about $4,400. So a separation of around $600. If you're looking at some of the different variations of the 58, say bronze as an example, that will potentially shift it more into the direction of the Pelagos. But considering that you can get one for $600 less, I think you have to give the option to the 58. And keeping in mind it again that the Pelagos 39 is still in its infancy as a model family. So now let's tally up all the points here and see who won. For the Black Bay 58, it comes home with 8 points, and the Pelagos comes home with 5 points. So the Pelagos is obviously inferior to the Black Bay 58, and you should always get the Black Bay 58 in every single circumstance, no questions asked. That is not true in any way. I think this still does come down to ultimately what you want. So I will sum it up with these points. I do think in general, the 58 is going to make more sense for more people out there. It has more options. Again, it has been around longer, so that's not really that fair. It has the heritage angle, which again, so many people like, but some people maybe don't like as much. I would say in general, it's more of the versatile pick. It could be maybe dressed up a little bit more than the Pelagos. Again, you have that optionality at your disposal as well. And it's more of the safer and expected choice, which comes with some downsides also because it is kind of a pretty played out model. But I don't say that as pushing someone away from it because I own a 58 and I don't get tired of it at all. It's just more of an expected pick. But then on the other side for the Pelagos, why would somebody go for the Pelagos in comparison to the 58 after seeing that it gets more points and also that it's so beloved by so many people? I think it is the more contemporary dive watch. It also has its own design that isn't pulling so much from the past. It's more sporty. It also has a more slightly utilitarian types of build and approach. When somebody picks out the Black Bay 58s, I think it's just like, oh yeah, makes sense. Why wouldn't you get the Black Bay 58? When somebody gets the Pelagos, now the 39, I think sure you have the kind of the same reaction, but with the 42 millimeter options, I always was like, yeah, look at that. Like he's going against the grain. I like that guy. And also the Pelagos is more of a sleeper pick. When I see the Pelagos out in the wild, I almost just want to ask the person, hey, what made you decide on the Pelagos? When I see the 58, I don't really have the same kind of curiosity. And that's not to say the 58's a better watch. It's just that it is so done to death sometimes by Tudor with the different Black Bay models that it's almost kind of a decision that's made for you. The Pelagos, you kind of have to make the decision for yourself because the brand kind of neglected it for a long period of time in comparison to the Black Bay. And it's still in its infancy. So if you want something that's a little more contemporary, sportier, utilitarian, and a bit more of a sleeper pick and still pretty much meets the 58 on almost every level, then maybe you like the Pelagos more. So I think both of these are two different types of buyers. You kind of have to determine which side of the aisle are you on. I don't think they're necessarily wrong choices. You just have to figure out what bucket you're in. Or if you're one of those crazy people like me that wants them both, then that's the other third bucket, which is also an option. But all right, guys, that is my take looking at the Black Bay 58 versus the Tudor Pelagos. These are models that I love. I have spent a lot of time wearing Tudor watches. I own several Tudor watches. So this is just something that I just wanted to think about a little bit further and really go down this checklist and trying to determine which one is better for which type of individual. Did you buy one of these watches? Did you contemplate this decision for yourself? And ultimately, what decision did you come to and what watch do you like more? Love to see comments down below, and that's also helpful for other people that are trying to make this decision for themselves. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That helps out the channel tremendously, so I do appreciate it. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the brands that we offer, over 30 brands in our assortment, and how the best way to really support the content. Of course, watching is a great way to do it, but if you're in the market for a watch, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. Guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.